how's it going? Sarah Larson here with a BTN Newsbreak. Coming up tonight, memorials mark the 15th anniversary of the September 11 attacks. A helping hand for the green sea turtles in Queensland. And a school musical with remote performers. But first tonight to the US, where there have been big memorials to mark the 15th anniversary of the September 11 terrorist attacks. Tash found out what happened and how the effects of the attacks are still being felt in the US and overseas.
With flowers, flags and speeches, New Yorkers marked the 15th anniversary of an event that claimed the lives of almost 3,000 people.
Frank Thomas Aquilino.
Firefighter Joseph Patrick Henry.
And my brother Louis Anthony Williams, who we miss and love dearly.
On September 11, 2001, members of a terrorist group called Al-Qaeda hijacked planes and flew them into the two massive World Trade Center buildings. They also targeted the Pentagon, which is America's defense headquarters. It's thought a fourth hijacked plane was headed for the White House, but passengers overpowered the terrorists before it crashed into a field. The attacks had a massive effect on America and the rest of the world. After the attacks, the US and its allies, including Australia, went to war in Afghanistan, where Al-Qaeda was based. There were also massive changes to security at airports and on planes around the world, and governments became more aware of the threat of terrorism. In New York, there's now a new World Trade Center, and at the site of the old buildings, there's a museum and two huge memorials dedicated to the victims of the 9/11 attacks. For people in the city and overseas visitors, it's a place to reflect on the tragedy and to hope for a more peaceful future.
Well, back in Australia, there's been a lot of debate today about Australia's marriage laws. This morning, Labor and the Greens both introduced their own marriage equality bills, which would let people of the same sex get married. The government has already said it'll have a big public vote called a plebiscite on marriage equality. But some people are against that because they say it'd be expensive and it might spark public debate, which would be hurtful to some people. Some wild weather's caused flooding in the Victorian cities of Casterton and Coleraine. At least 14 homes were flooded and people had to move to emergency accommodation. The state's getting ready for some more heavy rain over the next 3 days. And 1.5 million Muslims have gathered in Mecca to take part in the Hajj. It's a spiritual journey that every Muslim is expected to do at least once in their life, if they're physically able and they can afford it. They travel from around the world to the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, which was the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad, and they spend 5 days praying and visiting sacred sites. With so many people there at once, things can get dangerous, and there was extra security there this year to keep everyone safe. Now to somewhere called Rain Island off the coast of Queensland, where there's a huge project going on to save an important nesting site for green sea turtles. Here's Emma with more.
About 620 kilometres off the coast of Cairns is a tiny island that humans aren't allowed to visit. But Rain Island is a seriously popular spot with these guys, green sea turtles. Every year, tens of thousands of green sea turtles come here to lay their eggs.
There is no island like it in the world where so many turtles come together and lay their eggs. So certainly this is a unique spot and one that we had to get right for the sake of a species.
But rising sea levels have caused problems on this island. The sand has eroded and nests are flooding, which means the eggs can't hatch. Green sea turtles are an endangered species, so the Queensland Government got together with traditional owners and some other groups to save the turtles and their habitat. They brought in some serious machinery and started rebuilding the beaches.
Sand moving, land moving equipment, we were able to regrade parts of the island and raise the sand to live above the sea level.
We can reshape the beaches and fence the cliffs and greatly increase the number of turtles that survive back into the ocean to come back to Rain Island one day and lay nests of their own.
Scientists say the project has saved hundreds of turtles and hatchlings, but there's still a long way to go to make sure this important turtle nesting site isn't lost forever.
Well, meanwhile, some kids in Outback Queensland have been getting ready for their school musical. And while that might not sound that unusual, the way they've been practicing is. They do distance education, so all the singing and the dancing has to happen online. Here's Jack with more.
Riley, Elkie and Livia have their characters, their scripts and are ready for rehearsals. But this isn't your typical production. They're rehearsing their lines more than 200 kilometres from their director.
Good afternoon to the Robertson family.
They're part of the Longreach School of Distance Education. It's for kids from all over remote northern Queensland who live a long way from regular classrooms. They do a lot of their learning online or over the phone, but that doesn't stop them from putting on a show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I declare the police box.
Well, as playing Papa Bear, I get to be the baddie and have a little bit more fun with the character.
This is the police. Keep back and
so I'm playing Chief Inspector Drain, and I like doing him because you get to do a lot of yelling and a lot of expressive voice.
The actual performance isn't until December, and they'll only have a few opportunities to meet up with their classmates before that, which their director says can be a little bit difficult.
Extremely nerve-wracking, because when we come together for the first time, it's usually a little bit chaotic, but on the night, it is absolutely amazing.
Until then, there'll be a lot of practicing at home, with a little bit of help from Mum and Dad.
Fantastic, mate. You've got to make sure you make eye contact, okay?
To get them ready to shine on opening night.
Goats are my boys, which makes me the goat father.
Well, speaking of musicals, around 3,000 school students put on a spectacular show in Melbourne over the weekend. The Victorian State Schools Spectacular was on, which is a chance for public schools around the state to show off their best performing arts. There was more than 2 hours of singing, dancing, playing, drama and more. These guys put together their routines with the help of some professional performers, and the result was pretty impressive. The Australian War Memorial has let people have a peek in its storage warehouse. That's where it keeps a heap of stuff that's not usually on public display, including tanks, helicopters and planes. More than 3,000 people came along on Saturday to get a look. And an elephant in the US has been given a new pair of shoes. 41-year-old Shanti has got nasty arthritis in her feet, so keepers at the Smithsonian Zoo in Washington DC made her some special boots to keep her comfortable. Shanti also gets daily pedicures and foot soaks, and the zoo says it's made a big difference. Let's check out the sport now, and here's Emma with the latest from the Paralympics.
Australia's Paralympians have scored a few more medals over in Rio. Katie Kelly won a gold medal in the PT5 triathlon, which is the class for visually impaired athletes. Madison Elliott also got gold with a record-breaking time in the 100-metre freestyle. And in the cycling, David Nicholas won gold in the 3,000-metre individual pursuit. Stan Wawrinka has won his first ever US Open title. He faced off against Novak Djokovic in the final and was in perfect form, while Djokovic struggled with some injuries. Meanwhile, Angelique Kerber won the women's title, beating Karolina Pliskova over the weekend. The Wallabies have broken their 6-test losing streak with a win over the Springboks. South Africa scored the first 2 tries, but the Aussies came back and ended up winning 23 points to 17. Meanwhile, it was finals time in the NRL. The Brisbane Broncos easily beat the Titans by 16 points. The match between Cronulla and Canberra was a much closer game, with the Sharks winning by 2 points thanks to a last-minute penalty goal. In the AFL, there was a seriously close game between Hawthorn and Geelong. Isaac Smith had a chance to win the game for the Hawks with a kick after the siren, but he missed, so they lost by 2 points. The Crows had an easy 62-point win over the Kangaroos, and it was an extra sad ending for North Melbourne. It was the last game in the blue and white for Drew Petrie, Nick Del Santo, Michael Ferrito and club legend Brent Harvey.
Well, that's all we have for today, but we'll be back with more news tomorrow. See you then.